Good evening, everyone. My name is Luke Fernandez, and I'm this year's VIP Distinguished Speaker Series Chair. Now, the VIP Distinguished Speaker Series is a program brought to you by the Undergraduate Business Council of the Red McComb School for Business. Today, we have Dean Thomas Gilligan, Dean of the Undergraduate Program here at the Red McComb School of Business, interviewing Mark Gottfredson, partner of Bain & Company and founder of the Dallas office. We will begin tonight with a Q&A between Dean Gilligan and Mr. Gottfredson, and then we'll open the floor to a Q&A from the audience. As a reminder, tonight's event ends promptly at 6:30 p.m., so please refrain from leaving early. Mark Gottfredson is a director of Bain & Company's office in Dallas, Texas, which he founded in 1990. He serves on the firm's global board of directors. Over the past 28 years, he's advised chief executives and top-level managers in a wide range of industries. Most recently, he has served as the global head of Bain's performance improvement practice. He is also a leader in the firm's business strategy, airline, financial services, manufacturing, and energy practices. In 2005, Mr. Gottfredson was named to Consulting Magazine's list of top 25 consultants globally. He has been published extensively in the publications such as the Harvard Business Review, European Strategy, and the World Business Review. In addition, he is frequently sought out and quoted in such publications such as the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and Business Week. One of his specialties is in complexity reduction, a topic that he has pioneered and refined for more than 20 years. His book for general managers, called The Breakthrough Imperative, published by HarperCollins, debuted in spring 2008. He is fluent in Japanese and has extensive experience in Japan, working with numerous companies. Mark obtained his MBA from Harvard Business School in 1983, where he graduated with high distinction and was named a Baker Scholar. He received a Bachelor of Arts degree from Brigham Young University in Japanese. Prior to joining Bain, he worked in the financial services and real estate industries. Please help me welcome Dean Gilligan and the world's most interesting man, Mark Gottfredson.
Well, Mark, I know you joined me in thanking Luke for that fabulous introduction.
Yeah, that was, usually you have to die before you get something like that. So.
Have you ever been introduced as the world's most interesting man before?
No, but I'll take it.
Well, good for you. Well, welcome. Thanks for coming here, and welcome all of you.
Thank you all for coming.
I want to ask you first about your background. What was your very first job?
Well, how do you define job? If it's my first entrepreneurial activity.
Paper routes count, anything.
Okay, all right. Yeah, my first entrepreneurial activity was when I was in third grade. My father was in the Air Force, and in those days you could buy Wrigley's Juicy Fruit or Double Mint gum for a nickel a pack. It had 5 sticks in it. And one day I was at the base exchange, and I noticed that you could get a 6-pack in a plastic container for 18 cents. And a little light went on in my head. And so I bought one of those for 18 cents, and I took it to school the next day and asked people if they wanted to buy gum, and so I sold gum for a nickel a pack. It didn't take me very long to figure out that pretty soon I could buy even more gum. And so I became a corrupting influence on the students in my school, because they would come and buy gum from me every day, and I'd make a little bit of money off of them. It's pretty good margins, actually. And but I was definitely the source of many, many students spending afternoons writing 100 times, "I will not chew gum in class." And then when I was 12, I did get a paper route. And when I was 13, I added a second paper route. So I had one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And I did that through most of high school. And I've always had a job, basically.
Interesting. Years of dentist, thank you for that, by the way. What do you think has set you apart from your peers, both as a younger man and now as a leader?
You mean, why have I been able to achieve what I have relative to peers? Or
what makes you distinctive?
You know, I think the thing that has probably set me apart relative to others is an ability to work with senior managers and help them see what the full potential of their business is. What is it that they could actually achieve, and to sort of create a vision which is motivating to them and ultimately becomes motivating to their employees. Mm-hmm. And that's been something that's been a little bit of a trademark for me, is I've never wanted to go into anything sort of halfway. For me, it is you need to achieve full potential or nothing at all. And you need to be, if there's something worth doing, it needs to be something that is great, that you want to achieve greatness at it. And I think that's been a great asset to me over time. People do gravitate to that.
Interesting. Could you share with us the people you admire the most, both personally and professionally?
Sure. Well, I've been an observer of business for a long time, and I've been an observer of people for a long time. I'm a religious person myself, and so the individual that I admire the most, that I most want to pattern my life after, of course, is our Savior, Jesus Christ. Why? Well, it turns out there's lots of reasons, and I won't go into all the faith-based reasons for that, but from a very practical standpoint, the basic principles that he taught around things like the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have yourself do unto them, are actually great, great principles for us to carry forward in our own lives and in our businesses. I look at great businesses like Southwest Airlines or Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Some of these businesses that have grown really dramatically over time, even Apple Computer, have built in this idea of the golden rule into what they do. And if you really believe that, if you really live by it, there's actually great rewards. People flock to you. But also the other dimensions that I think that he represented were things like patience, treating people civilly, recognizing the dignity of every human being. Those kinds of things are the things that, again, I try to pattern my life after.
Fascinating. So he's both a personal and professional inspiration.
Really is. At the end of the day, I think that your core is your core. Yeah. And your core has to show through in everything that you do. Of course, there are people that I really respect professionally. One person that I think has done a fabulous job recently in the business world is Alan Mullally, who is running Ford Motor Company. He managed to keep them out of bankruptcy. He has simplified his business. He's taken Ford really back to its original roots as a company and has made enormous progress in a company that could have gone bankrupt but didn't.
Yeah, interesting. What strikes me about people like yourself, successful people, is that you're always working on something. There's always something you want to improve upon. Is there something you haven't mastered yet that you're working on?
I would say that I probably haven't mastered anything yet. I'm constantly working on trying to improve on every dimension of my life. One of the things that is a constant challenge is being able to manage time effectively, being able to prioritize and put the most important things first. I think that goes forever. We were talking in the previous meeting. I'm still working on my wake surfing skills, and I'm learning to shoot a gun better, and you name it. Whatever I do, I try to improve on it every day.
All right. You're not trying to learn how to play piano at this late stage in your life or anything like that?
I learned once, and I've forgotten.
We all forgot. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made in your career?
Well, again, that's a big topic. I've made a lot of mistakes in my career. I served for 3 years as a mission president in Japan. I had a missionary who was an experienced missionary and had learned Japanese very well, and he was working with a younger missionary that had come out and wasn't doing very well with the language. And this missionary gave him some advice, which I think is good advice for all of us. He said, the only way you can only learn Japanese if you have made a minimum of 1 million mistakes. You have to make 1 million mistakes before you can really learn Japanese. The obvious thing being that you have to make mistakes to learn from your mistakes and then to be able to improve. You can't learn Japanese by studying it in the morning but never speaking it. And I think that's true in a business career, and we learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes, actually, and there's lots of things that we can be proud of, but the mistakes are the ones that we can learn from. So, thinking of a mistake, let me give you one mistake. This was, I think, a pretty big mistake in my career. It was shortly after we'd opened the Dallas office. When we opened the Dallas office, we didn't have any revenue to begin with. And it came right at a very bad time. Some of you have heard in the press and read about the fact that Mitt Romney actually had to come back in because our founders had sold the firm to an ESOP, and it put too much debt on our books, and we had a real challenging time. And we opened the Dallas office in August. In October, Bain announced that it wasn't going to be able to make payments on its principal or debt. And so we were scrambling around. We were looking for clients. We needed revenue really badly. We were all concerned that we were going to get laid off. And right in the midst of all of that, we had a really good opportunity. There was a referral that came to us from a private equity firm. And it was a manufacturing company, and we had the opportunity to go pitch to do some work with them. And we went out, we met with them, we felt like we had some great rapport with them, and it just felt like it was going to work out. And so then we came back with our approach and our proposal. And back in those days, I mean, this really is sort of dating me, but back in those days, we didn't have computer PowerPoints. And we did our presentations on acetate slides.
So no one in here knows what you just are talking about now.
That's right.
What year are you talking about?
I'm talking about 1990.
Wow, that's a long time ago. Yeah.
I guess before most of you are born. Right? And basically what you had to do is you had these acetates. They were basically clear plastic film, and you could put them through a copy machine. And so if you drew on a chart, you could, and we actually literally for making a bar chart, we would take tape, black tape, and put down lines on a sheet of paper, and then we would copy it onto these acetates. And then there was colored acetate, and so if you wanted to have colors stacked in the bar, you had to literally cut out these little things and sort of fill in the blanks. Very time-consuming process to put a presentation together back in those days. And so we didn't have a lot of time in putting our proposal together, and we wanted to share an example of some work that we had done with a company on a similar kind of project. It wasn't a competitor company, and so I thought, well, we don't have time to put all these acetates together, so I'll just take the final presentation that we used at that client, and I'll just share it with them as an example. And so I did. I went in and we shared that example, and it had the client's name on it, had their data in the slides. And that night, I got a call back from the CEO, and he said, you know, we liked you guys, but we've decided not to go with you because you shared data from another client, and we're afraid that our data will be shared in a few months if you came and worked with us. And you know, it was a crushing blow to me, but also, you know, a really great lesson.
Amazing. What's your greatest accomplishment?
My greatest accomplishment is that all of my kids are, or I have one still to go, graduated from high school and are responsible members of society. That's by far my greatest accomplishment. You know, I think that somebody asked me once, you know, what do you want to be known for? And at the end of the day, I guess, you know, when the speech is given for my funeral, it would be nice to be called the most interesting man on the planet. But if somebody said he was a great father, yeah, that would do it for me.
Yeah, great. Let's talk a little bit about Bain.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about the company. How is it different from its competitors? And what are you doing in this market to thrive?
Okay, great question. Most of you probably know that our signature thing is about results. Probably every consulting firm would say that they do create results, and most would say people wouldn't hire us if we don't create results. But the simple truth is that is what is in Bain & Company's DNA. When Bill Bain started the firm, one of the things that he just really didn't like about consultants was that they tended to do studies and they generated reports. And those reports often became dusty notebooks on shelves. And so the whole mantra of Bain & Company from that time on was results, not reports. Sure, we make PowerPoint presentations, but we don't write reports. And it is all about pragmatism and actually getting to results. We are not intellectual purists. We have a rule at Bain & Company called the 80-100 rule, which is the 80% right answer with 100% chance of implementation is better than the 100% right answer with 0% chance of implementation. So that sense of pragmatism, being able to actually make things happen, is what differentiates Bain & Company. So when people select us versus our competition, and our competition are great and they do some wonderful things, but if you are basically looking for somebody to do a study that will confirm your hypothesis, you're less likely to choose Bain & Company. Mm-hmm. If you're really interested in change and shaking up your company, you're more likely to hire Bain & Company, and there's a lot of self-selection around that. Similarly, there's a lot of self-selection for the people that we hire. We interview people, and many of the people that we interview get interviews with Bain and BCG and McKinsey. And the ones that come to us tend to be a little bit more risk takers, a little bit more entrepreneurial, and we think a little bit more pragmatic in terms of how do you actually make things happen.
Mm-hmm. Has Bain always been that way? I mean, that's a very clear complexion and a way to differentiate yourself from the other consulting firms. Has it always been that way, or did that change over time?
No, the interesting thing is, I mentioned the difficulties that we went through in 1990. The one thing that stayed through all of that, we changed a lot of our governance, we changed a lot of things, but the one thing that didn't change was those sort of fundamental core values about our mission statement, which was written in 1984, which we still use, which talks about helping our clients redefine their industries and create such high levels of value that it can't be ignored out there in the world.
Interesting. I want to ask a question about corporate social responsibility, and I want to take the advantage of having you here as a consultant. It seems to me companies are worried more and more about how to fit in more broadly with society, how to satisfy the many expectations that governments and political organizations have for companies. Do you see that a lot in your practice, and how do you think about that as a business professional?
Well, it's a good question. I'm involved in doing a lot of things at Bain & Company. We have a thing called Bain Cares, where in every office we try and have 2 or 3 significant pro bono projects every year where we make a difference in the world. I do think that corporations need to do some things to contribute back to their communities. Why do they need to do that? Well, because business is where money is made and where great careers and leadership are developed, businesses attract very high-quality people. Mm-hmm. Some of the best minds in our country and in the world are involved in top businesses. For those minds to be wasted and not to help solve some of our social problems would be wrong, I think. Having said that, I think that companies get themselves into trouble if they try and make too much commercial out of that. So in other words, I think they should dedicate parts of their resources to help solve big problems. But should you invest in technologies that are not really commercially viable? Mm-hmm. No. I think that those are bad decisions when you invest in things that really have no commercial viability or rely totally on the government to be viable. Mm-hmm. That those are inefficiencies in the marketplace that we don't need, and actually are a misallocation of resources and end up wasting resources in the end.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Last question about Bain. In your role as leader there, what kind of skills are required to be successful as a leader at a company like Bain?
Well, Bain is a partnership, and by definition, the people who work there are very, very talented. And so a traditional command and control structure does not work. It does not work at all. And any attempt at that would have an immediate uprising and mutiny against it. And so what you really have to do is you have to develop skills at bringing people together, building consensus, working in the realm of ideas and bringing people to your ideas and your viewpoints over time. You've got to be very credible. You've got to be thoughtful. You've got to have good arguments for what positions you're taking. And then you have to be collaborative in everything that you do.
Interesting. We'll shift over to talking to the students a bit more. What's the best advice you were ever given about how to develop a successful business career?
Well, let me tell you, the best advice I ever got was this. I'll say it and then I'll explain it. If you put first things first and second things second, you can probably have both first and second things. But if you put second things first and first things second, there's a very good chance that you'll get neither first nor second things. Okay? What that means is you've got to put the most important things in your life first and prioritize them as number one. If you do that, if you put things in the right order and you prioritize things in the right way, you can get all the bounty of life. But if you set your priorities wrong, it's very hard to accomplish very much at all. You've got to have good foundations. And when this advice was given to me, what's the first thing that you put? Well, it's the things that are foundational in life. It's your family and your faith. You will probably, during your careers, work for multiple companies. You will live in different places. Friends will come and go. But the things that will be constant will be your family and your faith. Your faith builds the moral foundation upon which you create integrity and you are able to effectively work out in the business world. The family creates a foundation, and it's wonderful, the statue that you've got out in front of this school, which is the family is the foundation. And I really do believe that the family is the foundation of business success. I've seen many, many individuals, and I'll tell you, I'll give you the advice right now. I've seen individuals at Bain & Company, I've seen it even more at other places, where individuals come in and they want to make it in their career, and so they work around the clock. As a result, their family relationships suffer. When that relationship begins to break down, they can no longer focus on their work. The family breaks down, their career stalls out. They put second things first and first things second, and they got neither. So it really is critical to have those fundamental foundations. Like I said, I think that faith provides us with moral values. It provides us with ethics. It provides us with a foundation for being honest and true in everything that we do. And the family provides a bedrock that we can go home to and be comfortable with at night. If we have that foundation, we can build on it.
What's the toughest ethical dilemma you've ever faced in your career?
Well, again, you face situations on almost a daily basis. Mm-hmm. Do you exaggerate what your capabilities are? Do you describe your experience in a way that is not accurate for what your real experience is, and so on? Those kinds of things happen every day. And I've tried to think about, is there one where somebody told me that I had to pay them a bribe or there would be severe consequences? No, I don't have anything like that in my past. But let me share you one that we faced as Bain & Company. Those of you who have been on our website have probably seen sort of front and center our stock price chart. Our stock price chart shows that if you had invested in Bain & Company clients and had a mutual fund of Bain & Company clients, you would have outperformed the market by actually about 5-1 since 1980. It's been a very, very, very good track record, and that is audited by Price Waterhouse every year, and we're very proud of that. And as a result, you want to ask the question, what can we do to actually get a mutual fund that is Bain clients? And we've talked about it a lot over the years because we create vehicles for investment for our partnerships, and we want to be able to invest in that. And every time we've tried, we've gone to the lawyers, we've talked to them, and because of obvious insider trading laws, it's very hard to pull that off. So we thought, could we put together a separate entity? The only information they'd get is our client list, those kinds of things. We've tried to figure out all kinds of ways to create these Chinese walls, and we could never make it work. So we kept working at it, and finally we came up with a vehicle which we believed worked. We did all the legal work on it, and we even went to the SEC and talked to the SEC about it, and we got a letter from the SEC saying that the structure that we had set up would work. It would not invest in any Bain clients. There would be no investment in any Bain clients, so there's really no chance for any insider information, but we would set up a hedge fund, and that group would be able to take advantage of publicly available Bain information, frameworks, and so on and so forth. So anything we put out on websites or was published in a paper or something like that, they could take the basic thought process, the basic approach to business of Bain and Company, and apply it, look at companies, never could invest in a Bain client, but non-Bain clients, they could look at those basic frameworks and they could invest in it. And so we did. We set this up. We set up a separate legal entity. We took some Bain folks and we put them in that separate legal entity. They left Bain to go into the separate legal entity. And we gave them some money from Bain and Company to work at it and practice to develop a hedge fund. And then the idea was, if it worked, we'd actually go public with it and other people could invest in it and we'd raise money. Well, it actually went very well. Believe it or not, we invested right as the market turned down. But the fund outperformed the S&P 500 pretty significantly. And then as the market turned around a little bit, it outperformed the S&P 500 about 2-to-1 the next year, and about double the returns of the S&P 500. And it looked great, and we were ready to go to market. And then this galleon scandal broke. And so we immediately had a decision that we had to make, and we met together as a board of directors and we talked about this and we said, you know, everything that we're doing is legal. The SEC has 100% signed off on it. It's making money. We've been wanting to do this for 20 years. What do? We discussed it for an hour and we shut the thing down. And why did we shut the thing down? Because of the potential appearance of a conflict that was now created by what had happened out there in the marketplace. And it was not an easy decision for us to make, but it was a rapid decision because we always want to err on the side of being way to the side of highly ethical.
Yeah, interesting. I have one more question to ask, so I want to advise the students that if you have questions, we have microphones on either aisle, so please just queue up at those mics and we'll ask questions in order. Last question I have to ask for you is, again, for the benefit of the students. And I want to ask you, what makes a person stand out in your mind when you evaluate them as a manager?
Well, you know, it comes back to some of the things I've said before. When I look at both people within Bain and Company as well as the clients that I work with, you know, what makes a truly outstanding manager? Well, it's somebody who is never satisfied with the status quo. There's always a full potential out there. That they are good at creating value. And creating value, in my mind, has two elements to it. You have to be smart enough to solve the problem, and you have to be pragmatic enough to get it implemented. That's what it's that ability to create the new idea, but then make it happen. That is it's a really rare formula. Very few people actually have it, but those that do are outstanding. Interesting.
Let's start on this side. Is there a question over here? Now for the really tough part.
So
Yeah.
you mentioned keeping first things first and second things second. What are some examples of maybe some sacrifices or some ways that you've made that work in your life?
Good question. Good question. As a consultant, your career is very, very busy, and it includes a lot of travel. So how does my family know that I put them first? Well, there's a lot of little things. You know, my wife sort of feels like, you know, if you asked her, she'd say, you know, you missed a lot of your kids' childhood growing up. But then she went out and asked my kids, and she says, no, we never felt that way at all. Why didn't they? Well, there were a number of things that I did. Number one, Sundays are very important to me. I consider that to be the Sabbath day. I consider it to be a day that you don't do your normal work. And so in 30 years, I've drawn a line there. I've not worked on a Sunday ever in my career. I made that very clear to my managers at Bain & Company when I was a consultant. And I said, look, you tell me what I need to deliver, I'll deliver it. And I'll deliver it before Sunday. So I've always been home on Sundays. Generally, I've been home on Saturdays. In fact, the number of Saturdays that I've worked, I can probably count on both hands. But I have worked a few Saturdays over time. But there are just little things that you can do as well. For example, if I could ever catch an earlier flight home, I would catch an earlier flight home. I'd tell my wife, what the schedule was, and if I walked in an hour early, that was a nice surprise to her. And it really said, I care about you most, and if I can be with you, I'll do whatever I can to be with you. My kids had homework and things like that. Sometimes I couldn't physically be there to help them with their homework, but I did help them with their homework via the phone very, very frequently. And I'd be doing math problems, and I'd be in a hotel room, and if I sort of couldn't figure out what they were talking about, we had a fax machine at home. They'd fax it to the hotel would run up my hotel room, and we'd work through the math problems. So it's a lot of those little things that you can do that basically are indicators to those that you love that you're putting them first.
Interesting. Over there, is that Eva?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Eva. I'm a senior, and thank you for coming. My question is, in consulting, where you have to be so creative with your strategy ideas, especially when you're going globally in places like Japan and other parts of the world, I'm wondering where you get your motivation for trying to inspire yourself on what kind of strategies you'll come up with.
It's a good question. For me, one of the things that's been important is to be able to have some variability in the job and be facing different problems all the time. And I find myself extremely motivated to be able to identify those and to always be thinking, 2 or 3 steps out on the chessboard. That gets me up in the morning. What is it that my client has to do? There's going to be a competitive response. How are they going to respond to that? What's the next thing? And then how are we going to implement it? What are the steps? What processes have to be put in place, and so on and so forth? For me, that just happens to be extremely motivating. At one point in my career, I felt like I needed to run something, and being able to open the Dallas office and run it, hire employees, go out and sell business, and so on and so forth. That was a big part of my motivation. At different times in my career, there have been different things. Heading the performance improvement practice, building a practice which is now about 40% of all of Bain & Company's revenue, has been a motivator to me. But there needs to be something that's kind of out there on the horizon all the time.
Thank you.
Let's go to this side over here, please.
My name is Sapik. I'm a sophomore. My question for you is, during your time in the consulting business, in the consulting world, how have you seen consulting change and evolve over the years?
Great question. It's a great question. 22 years ago, one of my partners said to me, he says, what we're doing right now is what computers are going to be doing 20 years from now. And to a large extent, he's right. Many of the things that we once did are now SAP modules in IT systems. Because people just weren't able to crunch the numbers the way that they can be crunched today. But there are some things that haven't changed at all, which is that there are always big problems to be solved and strategic issues to be addressed. Like I said, thinking about how you next move on the chessboard, and that hasn't changed really at all. We now have more information, we can get it faster, it doesn't require as much resources to get it, but solving the problem is equivalently hard, maybe even harder today. And I think the need for great minds to be able to focus on those things is an ongoing need that will never go away.
Hi, earlier you stated that you were a missionary in Japan. What are some lessons that you learned in your stay that you could apply to the business realm?
Well, the first one is how to face rejection. On any given day, you knock on doors, you might knock on 50 doors, and 49 of those doors aren't going to let you in. And so being able to plow through and maintain some level of motivation, even when things seem to be going tough, was one of the great lessons that I learned there, kind of a tenacity kind of a thing. When you are implementing things in companies, change is always hard. There's always resistance. And I often look back and say, I would have given up long ago had I not had the experience of being rejected frequently. There's one lesson.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Kara Biasucci, and I work at McCombs. And I'm curious to know, how do you create an ethical corporate culture, and what factors do you think influence it the most?
Well, I think that, first of all, the leaders have to role model it. And second of all, I think that if there are instances of unethical behavior, you have to act very, very rapidly and weed that out. I'll just give you an example. It's always hard to fire somebody. We had an associate consultant who was very, very bright, was a star in our office, and there was an attempt to hack into our financial records at one point in time, clearly against company policy. And it turns out that we were able to track what computer tried to hack in. And it was the computer of this associate consultant. So I called him in, I asked him the question. He denied it at first. We did a little bit more analysis. It turns out that he had been in the Chicago office at the time that he did it. We talked to a couple people up there. He had made a couple of comments to them, and we knew that in fact that this was the case. And I consulted with our human resources department, and I called him back in, and I told him that he had 30 minutes to leave. That message got out very quickly to the organization that we don't tolerate any kind of behavior that's unethical on any dimension. Now, if you've done that right, you never have to do it again. And believe it or not, I only had to do that once in 10 years. Most of the time, you role model it. But when there is something, you need to act very quickly. I had a couple of problems with missionaries when I was a mission president in Japan, and I sent them home instantly, and I had no problems after that ever again. So there's a combination of setting a good example and acting very quickly if there's any incidences at all.
Thank you.
On this side?
Hi, I'm Michael, and a consulting major. I want to ask you, oftentimes the stereotypical image of a consultant is someone who's in an expert role or an advice giver, giving a presentation, giving a recommendation. But oftentimes it's actually more, like you said, collaborative and inquiring knowledge and more solution-oriented. What makes a good question, or what questions do you usually ask when dealing with a client to acquire information? And what are good, methods of collaboration rather than being an advice giver?
Well, the most important attribute is being able to listen. I've often said, the good Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that's the proportion we ought to use them in. And I really think that that's true. If you want to be collaborative with somebody, you've got to be drawing out and helping them feel like they are creating the ideas themselves. Like you said, if you are the advice giver, if you are the know-it-all, that is a certain path to disaster. People do not want to know that you know it all. What they want to know is that they know it, and they'll actually value you if you draw that knowledge out of them. So, we could talk about the skills of a consultant for a long time, but if I had to put number 1, it's that listening skill.
All right, thank you.
Over here, please.
I know you mentioned the gum idea for your how you became interested in business, but I want to know, is it an innate desire to run a company or to consult that makes you successful, or is it developing an interest over time and generally becoming intensely interested in consulting or business? I want to know what is it that makes a business person successful, and how do they go about learning about business besides taking classes?
Yeah, classes are good. The best learning comes from actually doing it, of course. In terms of the motivation that you have and what you want to develop, I do think that to succeed in consulting or to really succeed in business, you do have to have some innate curiosity. And you have to have a desire to accomplish something. There are plenty of jobs out there where it's not really about accomplishing something, it's just about getting an income. One of the things that I gained an appreciation for is when I was working in the auto industry and I went to auto plants, I wondered how could somebody be on the assembly line all day and have a career on the assembly line. It just seemed so ridiculous to me. And then I came to understand that that's not what their life is about. They work on the assembly line to get a little bit of money, but their passion is around hunting or some hobby or wood carving or something else. And they go to shows where they show off their wood carving, or they're into breeding dogs, or the passion of their life isn't their career. And I think that's completely legitimate. If you really have a passion that's not going to generate an income and you want to go out and do a job that's going to get you enough income to do it. I have a brother-in-law who was in the corporate world, and he was a trainer and he was doing well, and he just felt like it was taking too much of his time, and he cared more about water skiing and snow skiing and those kinds of things. And so he left the corporate world and he went and started a lawn service business. And during the winter, there was nothing really to do, and so he skied all winter. And, if that's your passion, I think that's fine.
We should probably interview him up here.
But if you're going to succeed in business, it has to be a little bit your passion. You've got to have that curiosity. You've got to want to accomplish something. You've got to want to build something. And it's got to be something that you care about.
Good. All right, go ahead, please.
All right, hi. My question for you is, how's the role of consultancy transformed from when you initially began to where you are today in terms of operations and strategy? And where do you see the role of consultancy going in the future?
You mean consulting in general?
Yes.
Let me tell you something. I think that there is something happening in the world of business today that requires a real shift in focus. And that is that for the last decade or so, people have bought consulting on the basis of expertise. So I want to get, I have a problem, and I want to get the best advice on HR in Minnesota in the auto industry. So you try and find somebody who's really an expert in that. What I've discovered over time is that most organizations have actually developed very, very good functional expertise. You go into any manufacturing plant today and you're going to find people who understand Lean and understand Six Sigma, and they've got black belts, and they've got all kinds of people who are actually quite expert in the things that they do. The source of value is no longer in being a narrowly defined expert, in my view. The sources of value are in crossing the boundaries in organizations. Let me give you an example of this. We did some work recently for a chemicals manufacturer. This chemicals manufacturer makes components for paint and resins and those kinds of things. And they actually had a very complex product line. And as a result, even though they had Lean Six Sigma programs and things like that in the plant, their overall equipment efficiency, the utilization of their machinery, was roughly about 33%. And they obviously knew that was not good enough, and so they came to us and said, we'd like you to come do a plant performance improvement effort with our plant, see if we can't improve this by 20%. 20% would take you from 33% to 40%. And so we did. We came in, we did Lean, we did Six Sigma, we did the 5 S's and all of that kind of thing. And that was sufficient to get the overall equipment efficiency up to 40%. But the thing that we noticed while we were there is that many of the products were very, very similar in nature, and we wondered if one could substitute for the other. Well, a plant manager doesn't really control that. He gets told, here are the products we're going to make, you make them. We weren't constrained by that, so we looked and we said, it's really a complexity problem. We think that there's probably an opportunity to rationalize the product line. And so we went to the CEO and we said, we think there's an opportunity here. Let's develop a task force that's made up of product development, engineering, manufacturing, and the scheduling people, and marketing, and let's figure out what we can do. And so we made changes and we reduced the overall complexity of their product line. It turns out many of these products were substitutes for each other, could be okayed for their customers. And the outcome of that was the overall equipment efficiency went to 67%. What that means is that the capacity of the plant doubled without spending any money. It's impossible to do that in the four walls of the manufacturing plant. You had to think outside of that box, if you will, and think across the boundaries. And I think that's where the value is in consulting, is being able to cross those natural boundaries that get created by organizational structures.
All right, thank you very much.
I'm Hortensia Campbell, a freshman here, and I was wondering, in what ways do you deal with your stress? Because I know that you have very intense workloads.
Well, it's a good question. Sometimes I deal with it better than others, I suppose. But the most important thing is the thing that I mentioned earlier, is it's actually having a very strong family and home life and putting that first. Whenever I go home, things get put in perspective. And even though my wife does accuse me sometimes of kind of never leaving work, the fact is, when I go home and I realize that there are things more important than what I've been dealing with all day, it melts the stress away.
Hi, my name's Nick Jankowski. With all the publicity going on around Mitt Romney and the presidential race, have you found that positively or negatively affected Bain Consulting, kind of with the association with Bain Capital and all their private equity work? And if so, how is Bain thinking about that and kind of dealing with that?
Well, it's frustrating, to say the least. The first thing that's frustrating is the ignorance, of people who are writing about these things and their lack of understanding of how it works. Second is the frustration that they don't make the distinction between Bain Capital and Bain Consulting, which are completely different companies and have no legal ties to each other. We are worried about how it might affect our business in the short term, because think about it, if you are a company and you want to do some cost reduction kinds of things and you're thinking about hiring a consulting firm, and you start to think about your unions picketing Mitt Romney's campaign events and being on national TV, you might think twice about it. And so it's a concern. It's a concern for us right now. In the long run, I suspect it'll be a positive, just because it increases the awareness and we'll be much more of a household name and be credible. But in the short term, it's a frustration and a concern, I have to tell you.
Interesting. Please.
Hi, my name is Fernanda, and I'm a sophomore here at McCombs. My question is, you talked about some of the pro bono projects that Bain has, and I know a little bit about your partnership with the University of North Texas, and I was wondering if you could talk about that or any other pro bono project that you really enjoyed working on.
Oh, yeah. Well, I love to talk about that. Let's see here. We're going to run out of time.
This was the last question. So
okay. We have a great opportunity with the University of North Texas at Dallas, and that is that we have joined up with them and have put some pro bono resources into that. And the wonderful thing about it is that we're in an era right now where there's a lot of experimentation going on with education. And the University of North Texas at Dallas is a new public university, one of the very few, maybe the only one in the country right now, where you can develop a 4-year equivalent degree public university but start from scratch and not have to do all the change management, because you start it and you do it right. And it's very exciting what we're doing. We're making great progress. We've developed some wonderful financial models. We've done some great research on what leads to the best educational outcomes. We're breaking a lot of the paradigms of a university education. I'll just tell you some of the levers that we can do that. There's 3 things that we're trying to accomplish. We want a high quality education at significantly lower cost in a way that creates much greater access to college for individuals who sometimes don't think they can afford it. For example, in Dallas, about 28% of the adult population is educated in a university. But when we went out and interviewed students throughout the metropolitan area, 65% of them aspire to a college education. More than half of those that aspire are not going to be able to go because they don't feel like they can afford it. So it's a huge problem that we face. So what we're doing is we're looking at things like facilities utilization, going to school year-round, eliminating the engineering building, the math building, and so on, and just building facilities so that we can keep them 80% utilized all the time and schedule them with good operations management scheduling algorithms to make sure that those classrooms are constantly being utilized. breaking up the perspective on research versus teaching and creating a university that's focused on teaching and much less on research, and what research that will be done will be more applied research. Going with online, hybrid, and face-to-face classroom settings, which have proven to be most effective in getting learning outcomes, and some of the new technologies with artificial intelligence and so on that are coming in with education. Creating large student-run intramural programs which will provide many, many students with leadership opportunities, which provide them with some of the skills that employers have told us students don't come out of school with, and so on. The outcome of all of this right now as we're modeling it is that the cost will be about 20%. Just to give you a sense, SMU, the cost to graduate one student, this is the cost, not the tuition, the cost to graduate one student is about $140,000. For a typical public university in Texas, of which UT Austin is one, but the average for Texas is about $60,000. We will be able to graduate a student with a 4-year degree, we believe comparable in quality to any other public university in Texas, for about $30,000. And after they get a few Pell Grants and things like that, it actually turns out, and a little bit of on-campus employment, because some of the costs that we incur on campus we'll be able to use in employing students part-time. After they get some income from part-time employment, Pell Grants, and a few other things, the model as it stands right now says that you can get out of school in 3 years, including an internship, with a 4-year degree, and out-of-pocket costs of about $2,000. So we're very excited about, we think it's going to revolutionize education in the country. I'm very excited about it.
That's great. Thank you very much. Mark, that's all the time we have questions for. Can everybody remain seated for a brief presentation before we leave? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dean Gilligan and Mr. Gottfredson. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I know that we will be able to take your lessons and apply them to our own lives. As a token of our appreciation, the Undergraduate Business Council would like to present Mr. Gottfredson with this personalized Stetson cowboy hat.